Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're going to be looking at Accounts Advanced and in particular the EPAC that has been released recently, ep4.07.02. Today I am joined by Ashley Goldsmith, the Product Manager for Accounts, and I'm going to be monitoring the webinar and just checking any questions that are coming in, and Ash will be taking you through the main presentation. So with regards to questions, if you have got a question that you'd like to raise, then do pop it into the Q&A field on the Zoom toolbar, and we will allow for a Q&A session at the end. Today's webinar is recorded, and depending on how many questions we have, we'll pop the recording up onto the help sites and also our YouTube channel, and we will put a Q&A document alongside it as well. So the agenda is just there on the screen for you. So when you registered for the webinar, you will have seen today's agenda. So Ash is going to be taking you through these points today. And with that, I will hand over to Ash.
Lovely, thanks, Georgie. Just share my screen, make sure I share my screen rather than my individual tab. Okay, I'm just going to move this toolbar out away for myself. Right, perfect. So thanks for joining today's webinar. As Georgie mentioned, it's looking at the recently released EPAC ep4.07.02, which applies obviously for the Accounts Advanced and the IFRS templates. As hopefully you're well aware by now, we have the dual EPAC running system for both of those templates, with obviously charities and academies on a separate EPAC stream. So just to guide you through, obviously there is the full release notes, which hopefully most of you are well aware of now, that should get emailed round to you, and that would have the full list of fixes and changes and updates for every EPAC. If you aren't currently on our distribution list, then do contact our support team if you would like to receive those updates. There's normally sort of 5 or 6 pages on a PDF, that being the cover page there that you can see on screen, which guides you through all of the changes. So if there's something in particular that you're looking to receive an update on, then it's best to look in the full detail there to see whether that change has made it in for this particular update. Now, during this session, I'm going to talk through a total of 8 of the changes. All of these changes actually apply to the standard Accounts Advanced templates, although there were obviously plenty of other changes that were sent out for the IFRS template in particular. These are all Accounts Advanced updates that I'll be going through with you. And basically, these are the main changes that were requested via our support desk over the previous quarter or so. Now, rarely for us, there weren't too many compliance updates required during this update. Hence, the changes that we're looking at are going to be relatively small compared to our normal webinars. But don't worry, there are some heavy compliance updates coming later on in the year. And I'll mention 1 or 2 of those changes towards the end of this webinar. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring a file in, and we'll start by looking at this issue number 1, this combined statement of comprehensive income fix. So I'm just going to bring a caseware file across. Hopefully you can all see that on the screen. Is that all right, Georgie?
Yeah, perfect.
It's great, thank you. So first and foremost, we had an issue with that was reported after the release of the previous EPAC. If you have a combined statement of comprehensive income, so effectively the P&L plus the OCI statement as well, you can hopefully see on this example file here that our total comprehensive income is incorrectly not picking up its previous subtotal here. So that was as a result of indirect change we made to literally just the gaps between these underlines and the subtotal in the previous EPAC. So an unwanted change that resulted from that is that this subtotal wasn't picking up correctly. Now, in order to fix that, now obviously I've applied the EPAC to my file, so I've already got this one table update available here. But what we'd probably recommend doing is using the tools toolbar, doing a remove and replace on that note. For any jobs that are newly created, obviously this wouldn't be an issue, but if you do have this particular issue on any ongoing files, take the EPAC update and then run a remove and replace on that note, which will just take a little while to run through, update the knowledge library, and hopefully then we will see that the total comprehensive income calculation is updated. Just take a little while to run through. It's always a little bit slower when we're screen sharing. Okay. So that's built in the new library there for the SOCI combined. And hopefully in a couple of seconds, I'll be able to just remove the skipped rows and you can see the result where the total now pulls through as expected, picking up from the previous subtotal. So I think there's been a few calls to our support team about that over the last few weeks. So obviously if you install that EPAC, take that update, do a remove and replace on your existing files, then that should fix that particular issue. Just going to pick up a second sample file now. So again, if I just bring that one into view. And I'm going to start by looking at the chairman's statement, which was point 2 on our agenda of updates here. So the chairman's statement options that we've made, again, obviously it tends to be larger companies that would need to disclose a chairman's statement. But one change that's been requested is this relatively straightforward update. If you click on the help button here, then you have the option for naming the statement. So chairman's statement, chairman's report, may call it something slightly different. But the change that we've made is if you change the description here in the help box, then automatically the wording within this cell here, the chairman presents his report, previously was statement, will update. Equally, if I was to do a print preview of this set of accounts, you'll see that the printed header of that report will also update accordingly. So previously those were slightly out of sync. So if you did update that, the header wouldn't potentially update either. But we've just ensured that all of those updates are now purely driven by this help box here and your input into that particular cell there. So chairman's report, chairman's statement, or whatever else you might want to call it. Those other headings and sections there will update accordingly. Just moving slightly further down in my set of accounts, one of the bullet points I think on the agenda was some enhanced sorting functions that we've got, and really what that relates to is the sorting options for extra sections of the strategic report. So obviously what we can do within all of our reports is add in additional sections. So we've got an extra report section table as well as an option. But what I've already done here is inserted an extra report section. But previously there was no option to then resort that particular extra report section to a different place. So if I wanted it to appear perhaps above business review, basically there would be no option to do that. I would have needed to insert it in the correct place in the first instance. So what we've got now is the ability to, under the presentation options, click on sorting, and you'll see there's this new extra section here for supporting the sorting of strategic report extra sections. So if I just click on that, then in bold and in larger fonts will highlight that extra report section, which I can then move up. I think I said we wanted it after the introduction, before business review. And that will automatically get resorted. And obviously the same thing happens. Same thing applies if you were to insert any additional extra report sections there. You can sort those in the same way. What I will say is that we don't quite have that functionality as yet if you were to insert an extra report section table. So they will just be added in kind of wherever you would add it in the first place. We'll look to add that extra sorting option in a future update. So I would have thought that's something as also that would be related and required by some of you. Okay, so that's our strategic report changes that we've got. Moving down further through the set of accounts, if I go to my dividends note. Now, as hopefully you're aware, if you have dividends in your file, then the dividends note obviously populates, but I've already entered in the analysis that's required here, just spitting out whether that 15,000 was indeed just the one final dividend, whether there were any interim dividends. You can enter in an analysis of how that 15,000 was made up. But until you do that, obviously, you do get this red warning message at the top of your accounts telling you that you have a difference because you've not entered in the analysis for your dividends. Now, in my example file here, I think I'm a medium-sized company. So therefore, this disclosure of the dividends note is required. We had a few calls on this because for section 1A, for small entities, there's no requirement to show this dividends note, obviously, even if you do have dividends present within your accounts. What that meant was that the red warning message was still appearing at the top of the accounts, even though the note wasn't present. So what we've done is to change the logic of the red warning message to only show if that note actually is present within the accounts. Previously, I expect some of you have had to do this. The only way around that was to switch the note on via the accounts preparation table, go to the note, type in the analysis, and latterly go back to the accounts prep table and then switch that note back off again. Okay, but shouldn't be any need to do that now. If you are a small company, the red warning message just won't show until such time as you switch that note on manually via the accounts prep table. Okay. The next issue we have that we've fixed in this particular update relates to actually the investment property note in particular, but in my file, I'm just going to show the tangible fixed assets note because we've made it align with the functionality of the TFA note that we have here. So basically, the issue we had was that if you entered in a prior year adjustment, as I'm doing here, you can see that in my example file, the as restated amount is automatically calculated and we get this subtotal underline appearing. And the same would apply if we had a prior adjustment within the depreciation section as well. Okay, now, if I was to do a print preview, then obviously that looks fairly clear to an end user looking at the set of accounts that indeed is a subtotal. The issue that we had for investment properties was that this underline was not showing under certain circumstances, meaning that to the naked eye, it looked like this didn't cast. It wasn't obvious that this was a subtotal pulling through here, and indeed the equivalent within the depreciation section. So basically, we've just made sure that for investment properties, those underlines are consistent and they work in the same way as the tangible fixed assets and indeed the intangibles notes as well. Okay, so just a minor update there. And again, just a reminder to take those updates, just go on any live jobs, just go to that particular file and perhaps do a remove and replace or take any updates that are offered when you open the file up for that particular note. Another note that we have made a change on is this slightly rarely used note. So for accruals and deferred income, if I look at the sign mapping number screen, which I'm just going to bring across in a second. Okay. there is the option, and I don't think it's widely used, but there is the option to disclose accruals and deferred income separately on the balance sheet, and also that you then get a separate note. So it's not just included within the standard creditors notes. If you choose to use this mapping, which is the F10 01 for 1 to 2 years, 02 for 2 to 5, 03 for 5 years plus, then you do activate a separate note. So in this example file, I've done that. I've mapped my accruals and deferred income to F10, which results in this note showing in the accounts. Now, previously, as you can see, when I hover over that particular amount, the true value is obviously negative, given that it's an accrual. But previously, those figures were showing within this note with brackets around them. Now, obviously, that's not desirable for the majority of users. We just assume that accruals would be a negative figure, so we don't need to show the brackets. So hence, we've taken the brackets off of that particular note. Again, if you want to take that update, it's just a case of taking the updates and removing and replacing. Okay, so a fairly straightforward update. Again, I don't think that note is widely used, but anyone that does use that particular accruals and deferred income notes, just to be aware of that one. On to the penultimate update, just looking for my tax notes. Here we go. And again, this is something that's been brought to our attention several times over the previous period since we released the last EPAC, and it relates to this wording down the bottom of the note. Now, previously, this referred to ordinary activities, which, as you would be aware, isn't particularly a thing in FRS 102 anymore. So the concept of ordinary activities really was old GAAP. So hence we've changed this smart wording here. So obviously it will still say tax on profit and loss if it was a loss last year, or loss/profit if it was a loss in the current year and a profit in the prior year. But we lose the extra additional wording there relating to ordinary activities. In effect, the wording should mirror whatever we have towards the foot here of our P&L or income statements, SOCI, whatever variant we're using, statement of income, retained earnings, etc. So no reference anymore to operating profit effectively on there. Okay. One final update, and again, I'm just going to bring my slides back into view for this one. Just bear with me a second. And again, this one relates to the disclosures for Section 1A. So if you're a small entity and you have land and buildings, then the additional disclosure to show split of your land and buildings between freehold, long leasehold, short leasehold, that table isn't required. So by default now, if you're a small company and you are reporting under Section 1A, that analysis table will be deselected. We do leave the tick box in place so that if you do want to activate that particular disclosure and effectively over disclose, then you can tick that box and that extra additional table would appear. So those are the main 8 changes that I wanted to go through. And so there are a raft of other changes that are detailed in the full documentation, which you can get off of our knowledge base if it hasn't been sent to you. And by all means, register with our support team so that you receive those details going forwards if you don't do so already. Now, the additional part of this webinar update, see, we're slightly light on the content, so I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of other things that are coming in that you may or may not be aware of already. So you may have heard about these Companies House reforms, in particular to do with the filleted or the abridged versions of accounts. So they have this Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill, which is currently on its way through Parliament. And the crux of it is to improve the transparency of reporting by making more financial information available to the public. So as you'll be well aware, the small and the micro filing copies of the accounts aren't particularly insightful. You don't get too much information shown there on the public record as things stand with the small and micro filing copy versions. But Companies House are seeking to change that, and effectively they are looking to abolish both of those filing copy versions of the accounts. So there'll be no small filing copy, there'll be no micro filing copy anymore. Equally, there'll be no option to file abridged accounts. So what this basically means is that all companies, regardless of their size, whether they're a micro or a large entity, will need to file their profit and loss account electronically with Companies House once this bill's gone through Parliament. The one thing that is slightly open to debate at the moment is the actual format of the profit and loss accounts, and it's likely that it will differ from the version that's actually prepared for shareholders. So it might be a slightly reduced version, but to my knowledge, that's not been finalised as yet. So we'll have to see what happens with regards to this bill and where it gets to this summer. But effectively for caseware, what this will mean is that your small copy filing radio button within the completion section will likely be no more once this update becomes live and the bill gets enacted. Obviously, we'll have to see what the outcome of this is. There may be a very similar option here for producing the reduced P&L version. But obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens with regards to that. My understanding that they're trying to get this bill through before the August break of Parliament, and then obviously they would presumably need to leave a few months worth of before the bill becomes active. But I would anticipate this would probably become live from next year at least. So that might be news to some of you. Some of you may know more or less than I do on that, but that's just something to point out for future updates. Obviously, as soon as we do get the green light on this update, we'll be making the relevant changes within our EPACs to make sure that we have the relevant filing options available for you, so that you can electronically file your accounts through caseware. Just one other thing to mention is the upcoming EPACs. We like to try to mention just so that your IT teams can schedule accordingly. There will be an update coming out shortly for the Charity and Academy template. The main purpose of the EPAC is to revert the FRC's charity taxonomy to the 2021 version. We tried to be ahead of the game by going straight to 2022. But unfortunately, HMRC have told us that they can't accept that version of the taxonomy, and the reasons are unspecified, as you can see on the slide there. So not ideal for us. We've had to redo the work to backwards engineer for the 2021 taxonomy instead. We're finalising the testing on that now, and we'll be looking to release that update just after Easter. There will be some other minor changes to the Charities and Academies template in there as well from issues that have been reported recently. But the crux of the change will be around that new taxonomy going in there. So obviously, if you do want to wait a week or two to apply both EPACs, CA 407.01 and this one 407.02, then that's just something to bear in mind from a scheduling perspective. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to go through. So I'll just hand back to Georgie, and perhaps you can let me know whether there's been any questions that have come in. I'm happy to try and address those now.
Perfect. Yeah, we've had a couple. We've had a question with regards to the sort option in the strategic report sections. Is that also available within the director's report?
I think the fix is purely on the strategic report. But let me have a look, because I think that option might have already been in existence on the director's report. Let's just have a quick look. So if I insert an extra report section in the director's report. Okay, and go to the sorting options. Directors report sections. I think it might only be relating to the strategic report, but obviously if that is, yeah, there's no extra sections options in here. So by all means, yeah, we can get a card logged and get that addressed perhaps in the next EPAC if we can for corporates as well.
Perfect, thank you. And we've got one user don't appear to be able to find the new strategic report when I go to try and add it in. I'm not too sure 100% if it is to do with inserting a new section into the strategic report. If you can just run through that again for us, Ash, on screen.
Yeah, by all means. I mean, it's pretty much the same process I just went through for the director's reports, but just click anywhere within the strategic reports and then add an extra report section.
Perfect, thank you.
And then as opposed to extra text section, the extra report section should give the alignment to make sure that it sort of ties up with the other paragraphs relating to the strategic report.
Perfect, thank you. And also just to say, if it's a case of the strategic report isn't showing on the face of the financial statements, then if you go into the accounts prep table, you should be able to switch that on. So hopefully that's been able to resolve that question. Perfect.
Yeah, should be able to override within here. Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ash. It was just those two questions. So what I'll do is I'll grab the screen back.
Go for it.
She says there's a couple more come in, bear with. Someone's asked, on a separate matter, can you confirm whether IXBRL charity accounts can now be submitted to Companies House?
I believe so. Yeah, the taxonomy, the 2019 taxonomy is still live within that template, and those, if it's a corporate charity, then yeah, you can definitely use our tagging solution and that taxonomy to file with Companies House.
Perfect, thank you. And the other question there is just relating to the strategic report. Is still being a bit of a nuisance for this one user. So what I'll do is I'll contact you directly to get that resolved. Right, let me share my screen again. Perfect, okay. So to view upcoming webinars then and to register for those, you can head over to the events page on our website. We do also have social media pages. So we have client services on LinkedIn. So if you want to give us a follow on there, and also we have a client services YouTube channel. So on there you'll find quick vids and little tutorial guides. And like I said at the beginning, the recording of today's webinar will be placed up there, as well as our help site. So our help site can be accessed via help.caseware.co.uk. Previous users that have been with us quite some time will be aware of the knowledge base. So the help site has actually replaced the knowledge base now. So if you head over there, you'll be able to find all of our articles, guidance, step-by-step guides, getting started guides, how-tos, various things over there. Perfect, so that concludes today's webinar. So thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. If there's any further questions after the call, then after the webinar today, then please do make contact with us, and the recording will be placed up onto the help site and you will receive a link to that in due course. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.